Notice of discharge forever of all known and unknown estate debts, duties, counterclaims, and limited liabilities. This discharge includes, but is not limited to, any estate debt, donation, counterclaim, interest, encumbrance, novation, violation, duty, contract, covenant, conveyance, custom, bill, bond, bargain, article, obligation, promise, pledge, mortgage, lien, letter, liabilities, limited liabilities, judgment, order, warranty, corporation, franchise attachment, hold, custody, consideration, information, privilege, prescription, term, or condition, thus freeing, liberating, and emancipating forever all persons, property, and sureties from any estate-related performance or burden for ellipsis I am. Let it be known and evident on public record to all concerned persons or men worldwide through the announcement and notice of this perfect free will writing sealed by my own hand in an offer to bring peace, harmony, and wholeness to all of the world, that I, the living soul manifest, known as Yeshua Elohei, man, estate herein dignitary/executive director, who acknowledges all that is complete will and testament of the estate named, or known as Yeshua Elohei, created on date September 9, 2012, and state through the hand or water of my natural-born mother or her person operating within the corporate community of YouTube and commercial law, now and forever discharge all known estate debts, duties, counterclaims, limited liabilities, and forever affirm and claim natural law heirs their jurisdiction. Additionally, through this discharge, including but not limited to, any subject, matter, issue, person, character, instrument, deed, title, certificate, benefit, insurance, policy, security, or other is hereby consolidated, merged and extinguished, ultimately returning said estate to its complete original natural whole state wealth, riches, funds, dignity, property, and domain for ellipsis I am, Yeshua Elohei, House of Elohei Estate Dignitary Pater Familia Executive Director Member Society of Sovereignty. Date of birth December 31, 1980. Commercial application date September 24, 2012. Signature spoken verbal contract sui juris. Wow, amazing. Is there anything else you would like to contract? Indeed there is. Notice of understanding and claim of right. 1. Whereas it is my understanding the United States of America is a natural law, common law, jurisdiction, and 2. Whereas it is my understanding equality before the law is paramount and mandatory, and 3. Whereas it is my understanding a state is defined as a legislated rule of society which has been given the force of law, and 4. Whereas it is my understanding a society is defined as a number of people joined by mutual consent to deliberate, determine, and act for a common goal, and 5. Whereas it is my understanding the only form of government recognized as lawful in the United States of America is a representative one, and 6. Whereas it is my understanding representation requires mutual consent, and 7. Whereas it is my understanding that in the absence of a mutual consent, neither representation nor governance can exist, and 8. Whereas it is my understanding all acts or statutes restricted in scope and applicability by the Constitution and/or Bill of Rights, and 9. Whereas it is my understanding that said scope and applicability is limited to member S and employee S of the government, and 10. Whereas it is my understanding that those who have a SIN, social insurance number, are in fact employees of the federal government and thus are bound by statute created by the federal government, and 11. Whereas it is my understanding that it is lawful to abandon one SIN, and 12. Whereas it is my understanding people in the United States of America have a right to revoke or deny consent to be represented and thus governed, and 13. Whereas it is my understanding if anyone does revoke or deny consent, they exist free of government control and statutory restraint S, and 14. Whereas a freeman on the land has lawfully revoked consent and does exist free of statutory restraint S, and 15. Whereas I, Yeshua Elohei, am a freeman on the land, and 16. Whereas it is my understanding that acting peacefully within community standards does not breach the peace, and 17. Whereas it is my understanding that any action for which one can apply for and receive a license itself be a fundamentally lawful action, and 18. Whereas I am a freeman on the land who operates with full responsibility and not a child, I do not see the need to ask permission to engage in lawful and peaceful activities, especially from those who claim limited liability. And 19. Whereas it is my understanding a bylaw is defined as a rule of a corporation. And 20. Whereas it is my understanding corporations are legal fictions and require contracts in order to claim authority or control over other parties. And 21. Whereas it is my understanding legal fictions lack a soul and cannot exert any control over those who are thus blessed and operate with respect to that knowledge as only a fool would allow a soulless fiction to dictate one's action. And 22. Whereas it is my understanding that I have a right to use my property without having to pay for the use or enjoyment of it. And 23. Whereas I claim the right to collect a pension if I have paid into it and claim that said right is not affected if I abandon my social insurance number, sin. And 24. Whereas it is my understanding that a summon is merely an invitation and invocation to attend and bring to life a corporate/corpse fiction and that they create no obligation or dishonor if ignored. And 25. Whereas it is my understanding peace officer police officer or policy officer and have a duty to distinguish between statute and law, and those who attempt to enforce statute against a freeman of the land are in fact breaking the law and violating people's right. And 26. Whereas I have the power to refuse intercourse or interaction with peace officer police officer and policy officer who have not observed me breach the peace. And 27. Whereas permanent estipels by acquiescence barring any peace officer police officer policy officer or prosecutor from bringing charge against a freeman of the land under any act is created if this claim is not responded to in stated fashion and time. 28. Therefore be it now known to any and all concerned and affected parties that I, Yeshua Elohei, a freeman of the land, do hereby state clearly, specifically, and unequivocally my intent to peacefully, lawfully, and rightfully exist free of all statutory obligation, restriction, and maintain all right, at law to trade, exchange or barter. 29. Furthermore, I claim that these actions are not outside my community's standard, and will in fact support said community in our desire for truth and maximum ability to be free. 30. Furthermore, I claim the right to engage in these actions and further claim that all property and possessions held by me is held under a claim of right, and is not privileged. 31. Furthermore, I claim that anyone that interferes with my lawful activities after having been served notice of this claim and who fails to properly dispute or make lawful counterclaim is breaking the law and violating the rights thereof the claimant, and cannot claim good faith or color of right, and that such transgressions will be dealt with in a properly convened court de jure. 32. Furthermore, I claim that the courts of the United States of America are de facto and are in fact in the profitable business of conducting, witnessing and facilitating the transactions of security interests, and I further claim they require the consent of both parties prior to providing any such services. 33. Furthermore, I claim the right to lawfully exercise my natural law, common law right to travel, unhindered, unencumbered at my discretion in my private conveyance of the day, to wit, my private, unregistered, unlicensed, or previously licensed or registered automobile due to fraudulent contracts persuaded under fraud, duress, threat and coercion and intimidation of non-full disclosure, false advertising of the media, and b. Exercise my God-given right to travel, exercise my natural law, common law right to refuse to obtain by submission any application for and from any corporation and or government-issued license, permit, or seek permission to perform any fundamentally lawful action or enter into any government, magistrate, corporate, or private entity contract under fraud, duress, threat, coercion and or intimidation which would involve committing an act of fraud and or theft, or any other crime by way of deception to claimant by involved corporation, magistrate, crown, private entity, government principal, employee, foreign entity, or person, in compliance with my natural law, common law rights, etc. d. Exercise my right to possess, cultivate, or use medicinally any plant of genus cannabis or herb family, and also